I'd like to start by reading 3 quotes that are attributed to ex-President Woodrow Wilson in his written piece termed The New Freedom. They're very short, but they get directly at the heart of the conclusion of this evidence report that we're getting ready to do. Quote, I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Note the word credit, not cash, not equity, credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion. No longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men.
Woodrow
Wilson. A great industrial nation. Let me see just a second. I got to pull up the part. Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce, keep that word in your mind, commerce and manufacture, are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it.
Yep.
Now, when I first read those statements years and years and years ago, it led me down, because of my other studies, it led me down a different path. But at the end of this research project, I think I have a much more coherent, accurate opinion and reading on what Woodrow Wilson was actually telling us. The Wall Street stock market system is a very well-masked, well-developed, and extreme form of financial asymmetric warfare. Financial asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare is a collection of activities used to bring down a country and its society from within without using a preponderance of force. What we as Americans have been taught and told for 100 years is reality, in fact, is a lie, wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in fraud and societal mind control. The sad and shocking reality about this, John, is that nothing in our country today is as it seems. This all started with the formalization of the infrastructure that has allowed the Wall Street stock market system to develop to the extent it has, as it has begun in the 1913 time frame after the meeting at Jekyll Island, which was followed by the subsequent congressional legislation that led to the formation of the Federal Reserve. Once the Federal Reserve was formed and approved by Congress and signed into law, by whom? The President. The groundwork was laid for the financial asymmetric warfare protocols to begin conducting the theft and confiscation of the majority of the financial and real assets in the country from those Americans who have a belief for the last 100 years that they were investing in the country by buying stocks, bonds, and securities on Wall Street. Remember this: the federal government cannot survive and operate without the support of the Federal Reserve.
Right.
In reality, the Federal Reserve is a privately owned and controlled, remember that word, financial godfather. The federal government, through the Congress, and because of its bureaucratic, political, and character impotence, voluntarily voted to give legal godfather status to the Federal Reserve. What our Congress did was exactly what the German Congress did when they voluntarily voted to make Hitler a dictator for life. The federal government does not control the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve controls the federal government.
Makes perfect sense.
The Federal Reserve controls the federal government by controlling all the money consumed by the federal government. This Federal Reserve control of the federal government is manifested by the fact that in the last 100 years, since 1913, the Federal Reserve has never been and has never allowed itself to be fully audited. The only minor exception to that, which was less than 0.1% of a full audit, but which in and of itself was breathtakingly shocking, was the partial edit done after the crash of 2008, instigated by Ron Paul. That is the audit in which we found out that after the Congress had given their $700+ million on the first round of what was termed mortgage bailout money to the banks, which the Secretary of the Treasury had committed that money was going to go into the banks and be flowed through to the homeowners to help defer some of the pain of the mortgage crisis. Yep. We find out that instead of that being the case, according to the report, that companies like Walmart got hundreds of millions of dollars. Excuse me?
Yep.
The Federal Reserve discloses that it is controlled by its 12-member banks. I think, John, there is a terrible disconnect in our country. And the word that you use on almost every episode that I love is the word engage. Why do I pause? Because the word engage means a lot of different things to different people. To me, you can't find truth and subsequently fight a fight if necessary if you don't first engage in the educational process of learning what the truth and what reality is. Once you are armed with truth, then you can conduct the engagement of the fight to try to stop whatever is going on that is bad. This is a huge issue. The question becomes, who owns and who is the controller of the 12-member banks? Now, I doubt that most people understand that under federal law, the bank which you consider to be your corner Chase or Wells Fargo or Wachovia Bank, whatever bank it is, you look at that corner like a franchise. You think that's the bank. It's not. Federal law precludes that operation side of the bank from being owned by the public. Every one of these banks has a holding company above it which owns the operational subsidiary, because the law subsequently says that operational arm cannot do what? They cannot trade their securities and shares on the stock market. So that means that the holding companies that own the wholly owned subsidiary that is represented by your corner bank franchise outlet is the entity that trades on Wall Street. What you must understand is that when stocks, bonds, or securities are traded on Wall Street, that activity is strictly controlled by the controllers of Wall Street, not by the company issuing the security. So the answer to the question is Seed and Company, CEDE. Seed and Company, as the sole registered shareholder through its parent holding company, referred to as the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. Companies, including banks, are ultimately controlled by their shareholders and not the boards of directors. Money, whether it's constitutional or fiat, is the grease without which nothing happens. The Federal Reserve, by its own disclosure, is controlled by its 12-member banks, which are owned and therefore ultimately controlled by their sole registered shareholder, Seed and Company.
Okay.
Now, Seed is the nominee. That's a technical term, and they only serve that role when a stock is being transferred from the exchange, which is the depository trust company, to the registered shareholder, one, not millions. See, people think that millions of people own corporations. That's not true.
Wow.
Seed and Company is the nominee for the depository trust company. Both of these entities are wholly owned subsidiaries of what? The parent holding company, Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, located at 55 Water Street in the heart of Wall Street. Seed and Company is the nominee for the DTC, through which Seed and Company becomes the sole registered shareholder of all companies that trade stocks, bonds, or securities on Wall Street. Let me say that again. They become the sole registered shareholder of all companies that trade stocks, bonds, or securities on Wall Street.
Good Lord, man.
This is the bombshell. The Depository Trust Company is a disclosed member of who? The Federal Reserve. The Depository Trust Company, with its parent holding company being the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, is by far the largest and singularly most powerful member of the Federal Reserve. Why? Because the 12 banks that are called member banks of the Federal Reserve, they themselves are owned by the DTCC. Therefore, the Federal Reserve legally I say legally because that differentiates from the political shenanigans that are going on all the time. I'm trying to draw a very clear line of demarcation between those two. The Federal Reserve is controlled by the DTCC. The great majority of all financial activity in the country, upon which the national economy, which means your checking account, your credit cards, your mortgage, depends, operates through, is obligated to, and is controlled by Wall Street. The congressionally passed asymmetric warfare supporting legislation gives Wall Street, it's going to blow you away, it gives Wall Street the right to do whatever they desire through the development and oversight of their own internally non-oversighted self-developed rules. Why is that? Because most of these entities, and we'll talk about this when we get into the actual report, most of these entities are referred to under congressional law as SROs. An SRO is a self-regulating organization.
Self-regulating.
Self-regulating organization.
Boy,
which
that's a sweet gig if you can get
technically
it.
means exactly what it says.
Keep on rolling.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, keep on rolling. I'm just taking this all in, making some notes.
Here's the conclusions. The golden rule.
Mm-hmm.
He who owns the gold makes the rules and has the control.
Yep.
Number 2, through its subsidiaries, the DTCC owns the majority. I'm not talking about John Doe, who owns the John Doe Donut Company, a private sole proprietorship or LLC at the corner of 1st and 2nd Street. Remember, for you to be a member of that majority, you have to trade stocks, bonds, or securities on Wall Street. The DTCC owns the majority of all private, public, civil, and commercial financial and real assets in the country. You've heard of a municipal bond, right?
Yes.
How is that municipal? I'm not playing Stump the Dumb, your Q&A. I'm using this to try to make it a little more interesting.
Well,
what
it makes it sound like it's a localized transaction.
But what happens, and we have evidence, and we're going to talk about it, what happens when an entity like, let's say, case in point, DeKalb, DeKalb County, Georgia, decides to make a municipal bond offering? How does that happen? Anybody ever thought about that?
Not really. I haven't. Not really thought about it.
Okay, the county is what I would term a local/county form of government, right?
Yeah.
They need to build a road, a bridge, a dam, whatever it is. Grid infrastructure. They don't have the money to do it. So where do they go to get the money?
The citizens.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
But they put together what? A bond issue.
Right.
People vote on that all the time.
Yes.
When the bond issue is voted on and the citizens say, yes, go forward, they don't realize what they're doing. All they're thinking about is, yeah, we agree with whatever the mucklucks are telling us. We need a new bridge, a new spaceship, whatever it is. They don't realize that what they're doing is they're giving the county government the authority to place that municipal bond offering into the asymmetric warfare, the financially asymmetric warfare controlled Wall Street system, because that bond is going to be funded through Wall Street, not by the citizens.
Let me ask you something right at this point. How long did it take you to reach these conclusions?
30 years.
30 years.
I've been at this for 30 years. Remember, in your introduction, I mentioned that I got out of the service because of what I had learned.
Yeah.
And I said that during that time, I got roped into the intelligence side of the complex.
Yep.
That's when this started.